we are gonna try to add fractions, and we have to remember that when we add fractions we need to have common denominator. Now when we add arithmetic fractions, 1/4 plus 5/6 for example, the common denominator could be the product of the denominators, 4 times 6. 4 times 6 is 24. And we can use that as a common denominator because we can use our calculator to do the complicated mathematical operations. But in algebra, because everything has to be done by hand, we are actually trying to find the least common denominator. So we will practice finding the least common denominator for arithmetic fractions in order to make our algebra process a little easier. So now between 4 and 6, the least common denominator is the number 12, and we know that because we know the multiplication facts of 4 and 6. So if the common denominator is 12, we need to change 4 to 12, so we will multiply the denominator of 1/4 by 3, and to keep 1/4 as an equivalent fraction, we will multiply the numerator. The numerator is 3 times 1 and it's 3. To turn a 6 into a 12, we will multiply 6 by 2, and to keep the fraction as an equivalent fraction, we will multiply the 5 by 2. That will be a 10. We will add in the numerator, 3 plus 10 is 13, and this will be divided by 12. So the answer is 3 twelfths. Now when the denominators get larger, like in the second case we have a denominator of 20 and a denominator of 36, it is really hard to know the multiplication facts of 20 and 36 to know that the least common denominator, for example, is 180. So the question is, how can we find that the least common denominator is 180? And the process is to factor all denominators into their prime factors. So we will say that 20 is 2 times 10, which is 2 times 5, and that 36 is 2 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 3 is the 9. After we find the prime factors of the two denominators, the least common denominator is now a number that contains every factor we see in the highest exponent that we see it. We see 2, it is squared in the first denominator and it is squared in the second denominator, so my least common denominator has to have 2 squared. I see a 5, it is in the first power in the first denominator and it's in the 0 power in the second denominator. 5 needs to be in the least common denominator. And I see 3 squared in the second denominator. 3 squared has to be in the least common denominator. What is the least common denominator? The least common denominator is a multiple of every denominator, which means that all the prime factors of 20 need to be in the common denominator plus some extra factors that will end up multiplying 20. Also, all the prime factors of 36 need to be in the least common denominator, and in addition some extra factors that will end up multiplying 36. If I identify the factors that I'm missing every time, I will know what I need to multiply every denominator by to get the least common denominator. Now 20 is 2 times 2 times 5, and what's missing from 20 to become this least common denominator, which is 2 squared times 5 times 3 squared, is 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so I'm going to multiply 20 by 9 and 7 by 9, that will be a 63 in the numerator, minus, from 36 what I am missing is, so 36 is the 2 2's and the 2 3's, I'm missing a 5, so if I multiply 36 by 5 and the numerator by 5, I will get a fraction with that least common denominator. Obviously, I don't know how much 36 times 5 is, but I know how much 9 times 20 is. 9 times 20 is 180, that was the least common denominator, and 63 minus 25 is 38. So the answer is 38 divided by 180. I'm going to do the same process in the third case. Now I have 3 denominators. They are extremely difficult. I don't know what the least common denominator will be, but I will find out. So I'm going to factor 18. It is 2 times 9. And I'm going to factor 54. It is 2 times 27. 27 is 3 to the third. And I'm going to factor 81. It is 9 times 9. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Alright, in order to turn all these fractions into a fraction with least common denominator, every factor I see has to be included in the least common denominator in the highest exponent. This will help me have every denominator as a part of the least common denominator. What does that mean? That means I need to have a 2 in the first power is sufficient. That will cover both the 2 of the 18 and the 2 of the 54. And I need to have 3 in the twice, 3 times, and 4 times. So I'm going to have 3 4 times. If I have 3 4 times, the number 18 is part of the least common denominator. It's right here. The number 54 is part of the least common denominator. It's right here. And 81 is part of the least common denominator. And it's over here. All the denominators are factors of the least common denominator. What's missing from 18 to become the least common denominator? 18 has a 2 and 2 3's. I am missing 2 3's. So times 9 and times 9. 9 times 9 is 9 times 5 is 45. What's missing from 54 to become the least common denominator? 54 is 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. What's missing is this 3 right here. So I'm going to multiply by 3 and by 3. 3 times 7 is 21. And what's missing from 81? 81 has all the 3's, but it doesn't have the 2. So I'm missing a 2, so I'm going to multiply by 2, and that will be minus a 22. Now, the numerator is 45 plus 21 minus 22. That's a 44. The denominator, I don't know what number that is. So do I know how much is 9 times 18? Do I know how much is 3 times 54? Do I know how much is 2 times 81? It's the same number. I know how much is 2 times 81. It's 162. Now, if I want to simplify further, I can simplify both numbers by 2. So 44 divided by 2 is going to be 22. And 162 divided by 2 will be 81. So that will be the simplified sum.